Hey everyone, it's me Dan, and today I'm going to be reviewing the book The Man Who Saved the Union, Ulysses Grant in War and Peace by H.W. Brands. Now, I had read Grant's autobiography before, and that really got me interested in his life, but I wanted to see something that was an outside source that would give me a larger, more holistic view of his life within the context of the Civil War and his presidency. And this book really did not disappoint. Now, instead of talking a lot about the story of Grant, because that's why you're going to buy books, it's a good book, I'd just like to mention a couple things about how it was structured and what I think about that, and a couple of the small things that really surprised me as I read through this book. As far as the structure goes, the book is organized in 3 parts. The first part is really Grant's formative years, so as a child up through West Point, and kind of ends just after the Mexican-American War with Grant leaving the Army. He quits and he goes home and tries to get a job. Then the second part deals with the outbreak of the Civil War, how he kind of wheedled himself into a position, and then eventually graduated to become the general of all armies of the North. And the third part deals with Grant's presidency and his life after being the President of the United States. Now, I personally found the first 2 parts of the book much easier to read than the third part of the book. And the reason I think this is because the first 2 parts of the book are really a chronology of his life. You know, this happened, that happened, that happened, and that made it really an easy read. While the second part of the book, it did that to a certain extent, but because you're dealing with the presidency and political issues following the Civil War, the narration stops really, and H.W. Brands has to go back in and explain what the political issue was, what other people thought about it, what Grant's challenges were, and what Grant tried to do to address it. And that, for me, slowed the narrative down, and it didn't pick up again until after President Grant had left the White House and his life became a chronology again. But that's really a minor thing to mention about the book. But for me, I really zipped through the first 2 parts of the book, and the third part of the book, it was a little bit of a struggle, and that could also just be part of my personality because the politics of the day, I don't know if that interests me as much as other aspects of life, particularly in this time period. Now, a couple things that surprised me about Grant that I knew the first one, and the first one I knew that he wasn't very successful financially, but I didn't know the extent of it. And reading this book, that really shocked me because at the end of the day, Grant was pretty much a failure financially up until the outbreak of the Civil War. And even after the Civil War and his presidency, he was taken for a ride. A Ponzi scheme wiped out all the money he earned as the president. So he was broke again when he left the White House. And up to the moment of his death, he was worried about money. It was a major driving factor in his life, and that's the reason why he wrote his autobiography. Funny, or strangely enough, it was Mark Twain who went to President Grant and said, "Hey, look, if you write your autobiography, I will publish it for you, and I will give your surviving spouse, or your widow," because everybody knew he was dying at that point, "the proceeds from the sale, 75% of it. I will keep 25% for myself to cover the operating costs." So Grant agreed to do that, and he wrote his autobiography up to I think it was 2 weeks before his death. He was worried about money, and that really struck me. Now, the other thing I like about this book is just the way that H.W. Brands entwines or includes source material into his text. He does it masterfully. So, for example, if he's talking about what Grant thought about a particular episode of his life, he will go and find letters that Grant wrote or other documents, and he'll quote it right in there. So he might say, you know, Grant likes apples, for example, and then next to it he'll put something from a letter saying something like, "Boy, I really wish I had an apple. I like them." And what this does for you is, especially as a reader and not a historian, instead of having to go to the back and flip through all these source material and wonder, you know, is Grant just making this up and just throwing a list of stuff in the back? I don't know. You actually get to see the source material laced throughout the entirety of the book, and that gives you not only just a sense that it's a fairly correct interpretation of Grant's life and the times, but it also gives you that flavor of the times, because you hear about what's happening in the voices of the people that actually lived through it. And so that's a wonderful thing, and it is no surprise to me that Brands is a Pulitzer Prize winning author. So I really like that about the book, and I was really surprised about how poor Grant was. Now, I do highly recommend this book for people that are interested in the Civil War period, but I also recommend it for people that are looking for an inspiration in their lives, because we all struggle with money. There's always that bill that we're worried that, can I cover the cost for the health care for the kids? Can I send them to college? Oh no, the car broke down, those sort of things. And Grant had this throughout his whole life. And to watch how he rose above that, even though it was a recurring theme over and over, up even to the point of his death, it's an amazing journey. And I think we could all learn something about resilience when just reading and learning about President Grant. So I found that he was an honorable man. I think his story is an inspiring story. And, this even goes a little bit farther than just, being inspired by what Grant did. His opinions about things, like, for example, and I'll go ahead, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, but as the president, he thought he was a very, straightforward man. Something either was something or it wasn't something. So when it came to the issue of African American rights after the Civil War, he looked at it, apparently, and from what I could tell from reading the book, that, the wars decided that. So we have to give African Americans the exact same rights as anybody else, from the vote to economic opportunities to all those other issues that we still talk about today. And that wasn't necessarily the case with his own party, or obviously with the Southern Democrats at the time. So he was really a humanitarian in a way, looking down the line and saying, look, if a person's a person's a person, then everything applies equally to everybody. And that's something that, honestly, most people of that day did not think. So I was also impressed with the fact that he tried very hard, although he felt his hands were tied when it came to Native Americans. And he tried very hard to give them treaties that were fair and enforceable, which almost nobody else of the day was trying to do. And actually there are some people, even in his own administration, I believe, that their opinions were we should just kill all of them. Just mass murder all of them, which is crazy. Grant thought that would be evil. Anyway, my last comment will be, the book's titled The Man Who Saved the Union, Ulysses Grant in War and Peace. But honestly, you could easily title this book President Grant, Who was Saved by the Civil War, because he was really an obscure personality with no prospects when the Civil War broke out. But that Civil War gave him the opportunity to showcase the talent that he did have and to rise to be the President of the United States. And he ended up being one of the great leaders in American history. So I highly recommend the book. It's a great read. It's very well written, besides that little bit of difficulty in the third part of the book. And I think that you will really, really enjoy this book. So anyway, so this is me signing off, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh, make sure that you like my video if you do. Share it, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot. Have a good week.